Hello, everyone. Are we live already? Let's go. Amy Khan here for Seconds Out. Joining us on Seconds Out Live once again. Pleasure to have you all in the chat. And we have a special guest coming on very shortly in the form of Hall of Fame writer Thomas Hauser. Great to see you all again. And we have a lot of topics to discuss, namely, of course, the topic at the top of the charts being Moses Itauma in talks. His team, of course, are in talks with Dillian Whyte to finalize a deal for a big heavyweight clash over in Saudi Arabia. But of course, I'm not alone in talking to you guys and bringing up the news and the conversation within the boxing world. You guys are very much key to the concept. You can give your contributions in the form of a like. You can subscribe if you haven't already, and offer your questions and comments in the chat. I see a healthy and thriving chat as per usual on Seconds Out Live. You have Thunderclap in here, Mike McCarthy, Bren H, as well as Brigger. Cuss's System is in here as well too. A lot of early takes as well on this big fight. Bren H offering that it's too early for Itauma. Wow from Tobulafe Ifogu, very much surprised by this being the fight. We were told that Dillian Whyte was in for a big fight after he pulled out from the Portman Road spectacle. Fabio Wardley beating Justice Hooney after being beaten on the cards convincingly across all the rounds until he wasn't, a moment which a little bit clouded in controversy, as well as Justice Hooney failed to meet the count. Maybe he could have. Maybe the count was a little bit slower than, or faster, I should say, than a normal count would be. But Fabio Wardley received the benefit of that count and was the victor, which was a momentous occasion, momentous moment for him, especially with the way the fight was unfolding. And of course, in the UK, we saw Callum Simpson in another thrilling fight, climbing off the deck twice in the first round, flash knockdown. A couple rounds later as well, to a more heavier knockdown, rose off of the deck to beat Ivan Zuko and claim the European title. A thrilling affair which sent the Barnsley fans home happy and healthy and happy to have seen their fighter get the victory in such an impressive way. But that leaves a little bit of uncertainty for his promotional outfit, that being Boxer, who have since lost out on a renewal. Sky Sports have confirmed that they won't be continuing with Boxer on an exclusive basis and will be seeking the conversations with multiple promoters, including, as per Ben Shalom, Boxer's offerings over the rest of the year, but leaving a hole to be filled in the calendar for Sky Sports, and the wonder from boxing fans as to whether they have the appetite to continue with boxing not being their main offering within the UK, Sky Sports and football being the number one offering for sports content in the UK itself, and boxing being a subsidiary offer, but still a big platform, big spotlight, and one that helped build boxing back into the mainstream for the main part. And it kind of leaves a wonder and a concern for those smaller shows, the spotlight for the fighters, when it's not the biggest of moments, when it's not an Usyk versus Dubois, when it's not an AJ, Tyson Fury, when it's not those names. What does it mean for fighters who are vying for a moment on the broadcasting camera? Those are the questions that we'll have to park for the moment. I'd like to introduce to the show. Hopefully, if he's ready, I'm going to get the thumbs up from Vinny if Thomas Hauser is in here. Thomas, are you ready? Can you hear me? I can hear you. You're sounding well as well too. Thomas, great to hear. I should introduce you appropriately as Hall of Fame writer Thomas Hauser over in the US. How's things? I heard you're still busy writing away, and you've got a number of things to speak to us about.
Well, I'm still writing. I have several primary outlets now. There's The Guardian in the UK, which is a wonderful outlet, I should say, and just wonderful people to work with. And I've done quite a bit of writing for The Guardian. I've written occasionally for The Ring and also the sweetscience.com. And all of the articles I wrote in 2023 and 2024 have been collected in a new book that has just come out. If I can lift that up, hopefully get it on camera here. It's called The Most Honest Sport, and it covers the last 2 years. I guess the dominant themes would be about the rise of the Saudi boxing juggernaut, the ongoing dialogue about the use of illegal performance enhancing drugs in boxing. There's so much more, some looks back on history. And I love writing, and I'm particularly grateful that the articles I write can be memorialized in book form because that gives them a life forever. There's always the fear if you're a writer that a server someplace will go down and what you've written will be lost forever. But here, that's not a problem. The most honest sport is in book form. It's available, and I hope fans read it and like it.
A slight spoiler, of course, you got to read the book to find out the information. But if you could let us in on what you feel is the most pertinent point over this last couple of years, what do you think has dominated and what has been the real content of the book over the last couple of
Well,
years?
obviously, the dominant story in boxing over the past 2 years and probably the last 2 decades has been the rise of the Saudi boxing juggernaut. And nobody, including the Saudis, know where it's going to go with certainty. But certainly they have redefined the landscape of boxing. I don't know how long it will continue, but it certainly has shaken things up, both in terms of the competition, the economics of the sports, the larger geopolitical issues. That's something I've been watching very closely for several years now and writing about, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, we've seen that over the last couple of years, but how do you feel it will the next 5 or so years, considering we feel that or we've seen some of the waters or the sand shift when it comes to promoters who's been the prominent promoter, the introduction of Dana White, who will be now confirmed to be doing a show, and the details are going to be coming to us shortly, as promised by Turkey Al Sheikh. But what do you think the next 5 years look like?
There's absolutely no way to tell. If you go back, it was not all that long ago that Al Heyman was going to take over boxing. Before that, HBO was going to take over boxing, Josephine Abercrombie was going to take over boxing. There's no way to know. A lot depends on whether the Saudi commitment to boxing continues. Certainly, Turkey Al Sheikh says that it will. Uh, there's just no way to know. It's impossible to know. There are times when the relationship between Riyadh season, the Saudi GEA, and Dana White seems as combustible as the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Right now, they're together. There was fallout before, and I don't know that TKO will take over boxing. I'm inclined to think that it won't. It might become, and if they commit to it, will become a very important player. But this is very different from UFC when Dana White and UFC essentially created a sport. And yes, mixed martial arts existed before that, but they created a sport in the public consciousness. Here, boxing is already a sport with a long, long tradition. While it's not doing particularly well in the United States at the present time. It's thriving in the UK and various other countries. You can't just take over a sport and wipe out the sanctioning bodies and the existing promoters. Some of them add great value to the sport, some take away from the sport, but they're a fact of life. So there are lots of pieces to the puzzle, and nobody knows how things will shake out. And anybody who says they do know is just fantasizing. People can have plans, people can have hopes for the future, but the landscape shifts from week to week.
You mentioned there as well, one of the main talking points is about the PEDs and the existence of them within the sport, the prominent existence of them within the sport, and the well, we had in the last couple of weeks or so, Jaime Munguia had also tested positive for performance-enhancing substances, which brings another close spotlight upon drugs being used in boxing. Where do you feel the position is right now with catching those who choose to use PEDs and the prominence of it within boxing?
It's very difficult to catch PED cheats. Everybody in boxing understands that VADA is the most effective company in catching PED cheats. And to date, Turki Al Sheikh has been committed to VADA. He has used VADA testing for his most important fights. He really has firmly supported VADA. Dana White has not supported VADA. And if you look back at UFC shows in recent years, I can't think of a single incident. Now, I don't follow UFC that closely, but I can't think of a single incident where a UFC fight was pulled down because one of the fighters tested positive for an illegal performance enhancing drug, or after the fact when a major UFC fighter was found to have used an illegal performance enhancing drug. And we all know that there are drug testing companies that, shall we say, work with the promoter, give the promoter control over the disclosure process. That's not in the best interest of boxing. And one of the greatest contributions that Turki Al Sheikh can make to boxing, if he is serious about helping boxing, and I believe that he is, would be to inaugurate mandatory VADA testing for every fighter within the TKO Saudi GEA Riyadh season umbrella. Make it 365 days a year, 24/7 testing, where any fighter who wants to be on the roster and under consideration for one of the fights has to agree to mandatory year-round VADA testing. The cost of that, which Turki Al Sheikh could absorb, would be a fraction of what he pays for one of his shows, for what he paid Eminem to appear in Los Angeles last year. He could finance VADA testing for a half dozen years. So, yeah, my personal plea to Turki Al Sheikh would be to make sure that the sport you love is conducted on an even playing field and support VADA testing to the fullest in the future. And as I said, he has supported it in the past.
Lastly, my last question on your collection of boxing columns, Most Honest Sport, before we move on to the Q&A questions coming in from the listeners of Seconds Out. Why was Vladimir Klitschko used as the front cover of your book? Was there a reason to that?
Yes, if I can, come back so the viewers know what we're talking about.
Sure.
Let's see if I can hold this up somehow so it's there on camera. There we are. Uh, Boxing, as I say in the book, is the most honest of sports. Klitschko is a very straightforward, honest figure. He and his brother Vitaly, who you know is now the mayor of Kyiv and one of the inspirational figures in Ukraine's war of aggression, defending against, I should say, defending against Russia's war of aggression, are talked about in the book. And if you note, the title and the author credit are in the colors of the Ukrainian flag, which is not an accident. So I felt that Vladimir was a good representative for the cover of this book at this point in time. Wojtek Urbanek, a marvelous portrait photographer, took the portrait of Vladimir. Quite frankly, he didn't have a portrait of Vitaly. If he did, maybe it would be Vitaly on the cover. But both men, Vitaly and Vladimir, stand for the proposition that boxing is the most honest of sports, and also that there are issues that go way beyond boxing that we have to face today.
So I have a question coming in from LVD Sport. He says to ask Thomas Hauser, how successful does he think Don King would be if he was operating as a promoter in his prime today with social media and more immediate scrutiny? And then secondly, offers as well, is there anything related to boxing that you would like to be the subject of a book but haven't got round to just yet?
Well, you can put those two together. First, it's impossible to take a person, whether it's an athlete or somebody in the front office or a promoter, out of his or her times and put them in today's world. Don King was the perfect promoter for his era. Could he compete against the billions of dollars that the Saudis have to work with today? I don't know. And also, one of the things you have to remember about Don King, and look, I have been a persistent critic of Don over the years. There was a time when nobody did more to exploit fighters, demoralize fighters than Don King did. And he had an unholy alliance with the world sanctioning bodies that was very destructive to boxing. But Don King was the first black man in America, in the history of America, in business. And I'm not talking now about a great athlete or an entertainer. I'm talking about economic commerce to come in and dominate an entire industry and say to people, look, this is who I am. I'm black and I'm from the streets and you're not going to change me. And that was an extraordinary accomplishment for his time. Just an incredible accomplishment for his time. Now, in terms of a book, there hasn't been a book written about Don King that I'm aware of, certainly not a major book, since Jack Newfield wrote his biography of Don King years ago. And that was a fairly one-sided look. That was a warts and all look with emphasis on the warts. I would have loved it if Don King had written an autobiography, really telling the inside story of his entire rise through boxing. But he was not inclined to do that in the past. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that he has the ability to do that today. So it's one of the great losses. Other than that, there are wonderful books to be written. Somebody could write a very, very good book about the Saudi boxing juggernaut, how it's gotten to where it is and where it might be going in the future. Tris Dixon, as I understand it, is now researching what should be a very important book on illegal performance enhancing drug use in boxing today. There are many figures who you could write a good, serious biography about. There's a wonderful book to be written about Bernard Hopkins's life. I'd love to see serious biographies about Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury that delve a little deeper. Now, to do these books properly, you have to get beyond puff piece journalism. But there are wonderful writers out there. Don McRae comes to mind, Mark Kriegel, who are capable of writing books like this. And that's not to rule out, some other very good writers out there. So I'd like to see some of those books written in the future. As for the next book that I plan to write for in boxing, there really isn't a good collection of boxing quotations out there. A couple of small books have come out, but over the last few months, I've been going through all my writing over the past 40 years, and I've pulled about 100,000 words worth of boxing quotations that cover boxing, over the ages. And sometime in the next couple of months, I'd like to go through all of those and fashion them into a treasury of boxing quotations. If there are any publishers out there who are interested, let me know.
Give us one of the ones that you've unearthed that's been buried by the sands of time.
Oh, gee, I don't know that I could pull one off the top of my head and just come out with it. And they're not necessarily buried by the sands of time. I mean, I was talking recently to Bruce Trampler, and he said to me, there's nothing better than a great heavyweight fight, and there's nothing worse than a bad heavyweight fight. Well, I think that's true.
Next question comes in from Custom System. This is more of a recent and immediate question, given some of the fights that can be made. He says, Thomas Hauser, my question to you is Itauma too fast for someone like Dillian Whyte, who is flat-footed? That isn't, of course, the thought that Itauma and Dillian Whyte are close to finalizing a deal for a fight over in Saudi Arabia.
I don't think Itauma is necessarily too fast for Dillian Whyte. He's just too young and too good for Dillian Whyte. Dillian is not the fighter he once was. Moses has an enormous amount of potential. Everybody agrees on that. He has not faced any true inquisitors yet. He's still young. He's being brought along. He goes into the ring against guys he's expected to beat. And yeah, could Dillian Whyte 10 years ago have posed a real threat to Moses Itauma? I think so. Can he now? I don't think so, which is why he's being considered. It's a name. It's a win that should wind up in Moses's column pretty easily, and then we'll see where we go from there. Like every boxing fan, I'd like to see Moses step up, but Frank Warren is very good at bringing fighters along. He doesn't give them, tougher food than they can chew when they're young. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that Frank Warren will not put his fighters in this whole TKO, I don't know if you want to call it a tournament, league, whatever, because Frank doesn't want to take a 20 or 22-year-old fighter who doesn't have his full man strength yet and put him in a tournament where he's not prepared for what he might face. Frank wants to build his fighters not only as attractions, but also as fighters. And that's the way it should be done if you're a promoter.
Sid White says, what is Mr. Hauser's thoughts on Keyshawn Davis and his actions this weekend?
Well, first, I think it's disgraceful that Keyshawn Davis blew off weight. When you miss weight by 4.3 pounds, it indicates that there hasn't been a serious effort to make weight, and I find that unprofessional and disgusting. And then after the fight, from what I have been led to believe and from what I have seen so far, Keyshawn and his brother Keon went to Albright's dressing room and were hostile in their actions. And look, you can try to play anything anyway and say that Keyshawn and Keon went over to congratulate Albright and they were met with resistance. My speculation would be that's not what happened. Either way, I think they behaved very poorly. Keyshawn in particular, and that started with blowing off weight.
Johan Wick says, working almost 40 years in boxing, what was your most enjoyable era?
Yeah, I'm thinking to answer that question, and it's a tough one because some of boxing's most glorious eras began before I was really active in the sport. I mean, I go back as a fan to Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and George Foreman and Larry Holmes and those four guys with Kenny Norton thrown into the mix who fought extraordinary fights between them. And I had the opportunity to live that whole time through Muhammad Ali when beginning in 1988, long after Ali retired, I had the privilege of serving as Ali's official biographer. Then you had the four kings, Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, Roberto Duran, Marvin Hagler, with Wilfredo Benitez thrown in, if you will, as a fifth king. And that, again, was before I became actively involved in boxing. I'd worked on The Black Lights, which was my first book about boxing, but hadn't got involved in the day-to-day nitty-gritty. That didn't come come for me until 1999 when I started writing regularly for Seconds Out, actually. I guess actually Seconds Out probably started in 2000. And yeah, 2001 in that time frame. Since then, I've been privileged to cover some wonderful fighters. I'm a huge Lennox Lewis fan. It was an honor to write about Roy Jones, Manny Pacquiao. But if I go back, it would, as a fan, it would probably be the glory days of Muhammad Ali. But that tends to be the way things work. Fans tend to think most fondly on the sports events they saw when they were young, just as they most fondly remember the music that they listened to when they were young. If you ask any person who's 40 or older, what's your favorite music? They're not going to name something that they listened to 5 minutes ago. They're going to talk about the music they listened to when they were in their teens.
The next question comes in and it says, what are Thomas' memories of the late, great Mike McCallum?
I did not know Mike McCallum well because, again, he was fighting before I became actively involved in boxing, but he was a very, very good fighter. He was a legitimate champion. There are so many sanctioning bodies now and so many phony belts, and it really, to my way of thinking, ruins the sport. But Mike McCallum, he was a great fighter. You know, they called him the body snatcher for a reason. He was very good.
Greg Dale 9472 wants to put you on the spot and says, who is the best promoter in boxing today?
It's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, first you have to I mean, there's so many things to consider. I mean, what does best mean? In other words, right now, Turkey Al Sheikh is a de facto promoter. I mean, Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn and Golden Boy might be the promoter of record for his fights, but Turkey Al Sheikh is really the promoter of Riyadh season events. But he is losing tens of millions of dollars on almost every promotion. Now, is part of being a good promoter the ability to turn a profit? If so, then Turkey Al Sheikh would not be on the list. Also, most of the Riyadh season events are behind a pretty steep paywall, and their flagship fights, for the most part, are on pay-per-view. Although I think it's likely that Canelo and Terence Crawford will be on either Netflix or possibly Amazon, more likely Netflix, where you don't need to buy pay-per-view. You do need a subscription. Now, again, it's not the fiduciary obligation of promoters to make boxing available at an inexpensive price for boxing fans. Uh, but, you know, great promoters going back to Tex Rickard, who really founded the idea of the modern promoter with extraordinary fights, you know, like Jack Dempsey against Luis Firpo in the Polo Grounds before 70,000 people, and the Dempsey Tunney fights, which each had over 100,000 fans present. Rickard brought boxing to the fans. When Don King put 130,000 seats in a stadium in Mexico City for Julio Cesar Chavez against Greg Haugen, he brought boxing to the fans. So again, is Turkey Al Sheikh making some very good fights? Yes. I'd like to see him do more to bring boxing to the fans and make it accessible to the fans, along with bringing in, you know, more stringent performance enhancing drug testing. That's another great contribution he could make to the sport.
Hulusu Ozdemir says, Thomas, can you please tell us who you think won between Hagler and Leonard?
I watched that fight on closed circuit and I scored it a draw. And later on, I watched it again on television and I scored it a draw. So that's my answer. Marvin gave that fight away. Ray got into his head before the fight, and Marvin said, I'm going to go out and show you how smart I am. And instead of fighting in his normal left-handed style, Marvin came out and fought the first few rounds as an orthodox fighter. He gave those rounds away, and it hurt him on the scorecards at the end.
And then I think this will be a final one before we let you go, as I know you've got a lot to do, Thomas. But Zambana Love says, can you ask Hauser why strict liability is treated differently in boxing and football? For example, if someone had had 3 adverse findings in their career, they'd be banned off negligence alone. I think more just in the context of this, the wider dealing with boxing and PEDs.
Yeah, because football is a well-run sport that makes an effort to ban illegal performance-enhancing drug use. And people in boxing pay lip service to performance-enhancing drug control. But when one of their fighters tests positive, then they chip away and they chip away and they chip away at the findings. They bring in, phony excuses, they bring in phony experts, and they threaten litigation that can bankrupt, these sports governing bodies. And so, yeah, boxing as a whole doesn't have the will. That is why I would like to see Turki Al-Sheikh continue the commitment and augment the commitment he has made to combating illegal performance enhancing use drug in boxing. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether he brings VADA into TKO on a regular basis, or if he continues what Dana White has done with performance-enhancing drugs. Again, that is an area where Turki Al-Sheikh can make a huge contribution to clean sport and the integrity of boxing.
Very last thing, just wanted to say, of course, we talked about the health of the sport in the UK, but Sky Sports, as I mentioned there, seem to have dropped off their deal with Boxer. What do you feel might be the future for Boxer and Sky Sports if they are to continue in boxing, or even pull out of the sport completely?
I just don't know. I'm not conversant with the inner workings of Sky Sport. Obviously, the more boxing that is available at a reasonable price, the better it is for fans. And I think ultimately for boxing, the way you build a fan base is to make your most important events accessible to fans on a regular basis. And I hope that continues. I also, if I can get in one last mention,
Sure.
for the most honest sport, it is available in the UK through Amazon. It deals with a lot of the issues we've talked about this afternoon and more. And yeah, beyond that, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope we get to do it again soon.
Looking forward to that conversation. Thomas, thank you so much for giving me some of your time, and we'll speak again very shortly. Thank you for joining us, Thomas Hauser. Jumping back from Thomas Hauser and into Josh Hart. Josh, it's a little bit of a drop off from Thomas to yourself, but welcome nonetheless.
To you and Thomas there. It was a very insightful conversation. Not quite the same stance in the boxing world. I'm a little bit lower down maybe in the rankings, but I can only hope to be up there with the likes of Thomas one day.
Well, let's get straight into that top of the headline news, and that is Moses Itauma is in talks with Dillian Whyte to finalize a fight. We were told about a big fight coming for Dillian. Did you think it'd be Moses?
Not at all. Not at all. I was sat there in Ipswich on Saturday night, and you see the flood of tweets start flowing out, and you see the likes of Anthony Kakashi versus Raymond Ford, and then you see Moses Itauma versus Dillian Whyte, and you're like, hold on, where's that come from? It's an astonishing fight to see, really, especially at the stage of both of their careers. I don't really think we expected to see Dillian in a fight that really does feel like it's a must-win for him. I know Moses Itauma has got so much hype around his name, and he has really been proving the fans right and how good we think he is. But a loss for Dillian Whyte here really does. I'm not going to say end his career, but makes it an even longer road back than what he's already got. We know the heavyweight division is the place to be right now, but a loss to Moses Itauma for Dillian Whyte is really, really, really damaging. And as for Moses, a win over Dillian Whyte is huge. It really would prove that he is the package that we think is. He might be the next star, the next face of the heavyweight division. It's a brilliant fight. Obviously, speaking to Michael Offo on Saturday night post-fight after Fabio Wardley's fantastic knockout, I'm sure we'll go on to that soon. He said the fight's not a done deal, and they are talking to multiple opponents. I asked if Lawrence Okoli was one of them, and I believe the Lawrence Okoli fight is not being made. So all the lights seem to be pointing towards Moses Itauma versus Dillian Whyte 2 headline in Riyadh on August 16th.
Eddie Hill says, "Why does Josh sound more stoned than Hauser?" Don't know about that one. Get some comments coming in. Thunderclap was first. You sure were. Michael McCarthy says maximum of violence. Bren H says too early for Itauma. Jack Dutton on the 45 says the ring released this on Saturday. Ray Ford and Kakachi on the same card. Good fight there. I like that one. Brigger says I like Dylan, but I don't think he's going to make it too ring rusty against a young, confident bull. We had the questions coming in from Thomas Hauser as well too. Khan says thumbs up. Johan Wick says thumbs up to Khan. That's me. Thank you so much. Martin Mulligan says Monday made better by Seconds Out Live and by Josh Hart and Thomas Hauser's appearance too. MB says Thomas Hauser, what a guest that is. Hopefully we're getting a few more guests and maybe another one lining up in a couple of short minutes too. Zumbano Love says, would this version of Dillian beat McKean convincingly? Josh, what do you think?
What is this version of Dillian Whyte beats Dempsey McKean?
Do you think so?
I think so. Yeah, I do believe that. I don't think Dempsey McKean is as high level heavyweight as what some people make him out to be. Obviously, everyone's got their own take. But no, I do think this version of Dillian Whyte would beat Dempsey McKean, especially when Dillian is in the gym working all the time at the moment. I was meant to appear in Ipswich on Saturday night, but we didn't get to see that fight. But yeah, I think right now, I think Dillian does beat him. I think Dillian's still got a lot to offer in the heavyweight division, but like I said, the fight with Moses Itauma could really take away everything that he's got to offer.
Wally Downs Jr., good to see Wally in here. We can see the back of your ponytail in the mirror like a teeny weeny hat. Yeah, I get a free hat. I didn't realize it was in the back of the mirror, but there you go. You've got a good action shot of the back there. Don't be too jealous. I'm holding on to the hair at the front. The back is healthier than ever, which is, I guess, something to cling on to. Maybe I'll just get rid of the whole thing. Capital Commodity says the great thing about boxing is that everybody's free to express their opinion, but until we see the fight, it's all speculation. Eubank Jr. versus Ben was criticized, but the fight was a barnstormer. Johan Wick says, I like White, but he's went silent these days. Seems so common when they've had a few big paydays. Maybe it is the case that Dillian Whyte is at the end of his career and looking for that one big road to a world title shot, and they've looked at Moses Itauma with a high ranking. I believe he does have as one that they could take a scalp of if they feel his experience doesn't quite match his talent as of yet. Zimbana Love says Sky has had as much say when we saw so many shite PPV shite is his word when Eddie was there. They did nothing to improve the sport then. For me, I'll be definitely watching the White versus Itauma fight based on recent performances. I'm leaning towards Itauma. However, White is a warrior and he can punch either way. I will watch it. And Jack Dutton says Dana White says he's promoting Canelo Crawford now. We'll see what happens there. There's a lot of movement and things to still take place before that fight happens. Who's it? JN says Josh Hart is the best interviewer on Seconds Out. Do you know who JN is?
I actually don't, which was what makes that comment so much better.
Have a guess who JN might be.
Mine's blank right now.
Mine's blank a lot of the time. It's Jonathan Nagoff. That's who it is.
Oh, what a man. What a man. What a great guy. Thank you.
The fight was a Barnsley Stormer. That is terrible. A terrible joke from Jonathan Nagoff. What about AJ against Dillian? Says Jack Dutton. What do you think about that one, Josh?
I think it's a good fight. It's an obvious fight to make if the Itauma fight wasn't there for Dillian. And for AJ, obviously, we don't really know what's coming up next. We know that the two-fight deal being negotiated. When you look back at the Boxing Scene article, two names mentioned were Dillian Whyte and Jared Anderson. So, yeah, I think AJ versus Dillian would always sell well. I think there's history there. It's a good fight to make. So I'd be more than happy to see that at the stage of both careers. It kind of feels like a winner stays on, loser goes home type of fight.
Okay, another comment has come in here from, I believe it's Thunder Road, says, "Oh my, I'm late. Where's Thomas Hauser? Did I miss him? You did indeed miss him. You keep upping the guests from a journalistic standpoint. Salute to SO Live and hope this deflection is relatively well. Danny is on the mend and hopefully back very, very soon. But you won't have missed out on hopefully another guest coming in who Josh has got some questions for when he does arrive. Once he does, don't want to give away the name just yet because in the event that he might not turn up, but should be arriving shortly. We will, however, move on whilst we're waiting for the next guest to our next topic, and that is the uncertainty surrounding the certainty surrounding that Sky Sports and Boxer won't be continuing on an exclusive deal. The broadcast cycle has come to an end as it's been put, meaning the deal has come to an end. And that means that for the exclusive purposes, Boxer and Sky are saying goodbye. But Ben Shalom says that there will be capacity and there are talks continuing for them to continue, reported to be in a play-by-play capacity where other promoters can also pitch their fights maybe alongside Ben Shalom or exclusive to that with their own fight nights. And Sky seem to be in some form continuing with the sport alongside maybe a skeleton crew to send along to broadcast when they broadcast fights like pay-per-view fights for the Ring and Riyadh season type of scenarios. Boxer and Sky, what have you made of their time within the sport, Josh? Do you think they were a success?
I think they were. I think they were a big success, especially at the start. The start of the Sky and Boxer era, it seemed like a very fast climb for Ben Shalom. You know, I remember when we had that little, I think it was 1 month run where we saw him go from Eubank Jr. versus Liam Williams to Amir Khan versus Kell Brook, and then the week later they had Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall, which was 3 superb shows, you know, all within the same period. And I'm sure they all did great numbers, especially when not just ticket wise, but obviously around the world, people watching on Sky Sports. You also look at the likes of, you know, a night that will always stand out for me in the Boxer and Sky era, Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clark 1. When we're looking at just Boxer shows in particular, we saw a really one of the best heavyweight fights I've seen in a long time that night. So I'd say it's a success. Whether they do continue to work together or Ben Shalom is something else. Speaking to Ben last week, he said they've got exciting news coming soon. And in my interview with him on the Thursday, he said that they won't be looking at doing a play-by-play deal with Sky. So we're not too sure what can be next for Boxer. But I do think the time with Sky was quite successful. While slowed down at times a little bit, and obviously we see a lot of criticism on social media, I do think it's been a success, and a lot of fighters have benefited from being on that platform.
Yeah, indeed. It remains to be seen as to what the situation will be. But what if Sky Sports do indeed take a hiatus or even a clean break from the sport? What gap, what hole would that leave in boxing?
I think it leaves a massive gap. I think Sky going out of the game it's not good for the sport at all. So a lot of the viewers that we get from boxing, especially on your Skies and your TNTs, tend to come on those Saturday nights when, you know, you've got that 5:30 kickoff in the Premier League or whatnot, or maybe, you know, you've got a championship game on that time, and the viewers of that tend to just go, "Oh, what's on next?" And they'll see the boxing. "Oh, we'll stick that on then." That's why sometimes things like Channel 5 are so successful when you see such good viewing numbers on there at times. Because it tends just to lead on from what was on before. So yeah, I think if Sky do take a hiatus out of the game, I think we won't see as many eyes on the sport. I think we'll be missing a huge part of the sport's growth, and especially promotionally wise, and trying to turn fighters into stars. A lot of today's stars have come from being on Sky Sports, so it'd be devastating if we don't see Sky in the game. Obviously, I'm seeing reports that Sky want to look at working with multiple promoters instead, which I think is a great move if they are to do that. But if they take a hiatus, then it's very, very damaging.
And I believe he is in the building. Here he is, fresh off his KO victory, now up at lightweight, Zelfa Barrett. Zelfa, how you doing? Yeah, even better to be speaking to yourself. Let's get Zelfa on the big screen here. We can't just have Zelfa in the background video. We've got to get Josh's. Here he is, right in the middle where he deserves to be. How did it feel to be back in the ring, Zelfa, and getting that victory?
Felt great, man. You know, just to, you know, brush them lost cobwebs off, and, you know, it feels good to be back and, you know, back with a knockout.
When you say cobwebs, we obviously hear fighters a lot say kind of ring rust and things like that, but do you really feel it when you get back in the ring after a long time out?
You know what? So what I mean by the cobwebs, like obviously my last fight didn't go to where obviously to plan. So that's just shaking off them horrible cobweb. But yeah, you do because prior to boxing, like Jazza Dickens, I was out the ring for 10 months, and you feel it. You feel like that feeling of walking to the ring's a bit different, and your timing can be off by the slightest. Yeah, you feel it, man.
Zelfa, we know that this was your first fight with Joe Gallagher. Do you feel, in the build-up to the fight on the night, do you feel there was a new fire, a new lease of life there, having a change of scenery and a change of team in the dressing room?
Yeah, man. I felt like mad rejuvenated. Like it just felt different, and just even like the training, the lead up, the instructions. I just felt like really motivated. I was motivated anyway, but it just felt different.
Do you feel the change has come at the perfect time for yourself, and it's kind of relit that fire for yourself to go and compete at the top level of the sport?
Yeah, of course. I believe, this is my prime now. 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. Like these years now, when you look at fighters, this is when they're really, really, really in the prime. Like they're experienced. They might have took a loss or they not have took a loss. They know the way around the ring. And these are these times here where the best fighters are, these ages, you know what I mean? So I do feel like I'm in my prime and I'm getting guided by one of the best trainers ever in Britain, you know what I mean? And I'm just like a sponge. I just soak it up and listen to him. He'll tell you I might come a few minutes late to the gym, but I'm always the last to leave. Always the last to leave. And anything he tells me to do, I don't complain. I don't pull a face. Just do it.
Obviously, you mentioned being in your prime now. Looking at the experience that you've had in your career as well, I think one of the highlight nights, obviously, the night you challenged for the world title. With all that experience and you feeling like you're in your prime, do you feel the move up to lightweight as well is going to play a massive part now?
1,000,000%. At lightweight, like I was super featherweight since I was an amateur. Literally, my first fight was at flipping 59 kilo, and I was 16. Like I've been this whole weight. I was just like kidding myself, like I'm making a weight because I've been. If I'm ranked so high in this governing body at this weight, and I'm one fight away from world title, then why would I go up? You know what I mean? So it's come at the right time. Sometimes you need to go back to go forward. I got beat. I didn't get hurt. I struggled to make the weight, and now I'm a different fighter, and there's only more to come.
Looking around at that lightweight division, there's a lot of noise right now, especially when we look at what's just happened at the weekend with everything involving Keyshawn Davis. What were your thoughts on when you saw the over £4 weight miss? What were your thoughts on that?
Just basically, must have been struggling. You know what I mean? It must have been hard. And he looks like he looks like he's in shape anyway. You know what I mean? So, and he's good enough to go up to 140. He's that good. He'll win a world title there. But boxing's a funny sport, man. Some fighters will be world champion and they might just retire. Some fighters will be a lightweight and they might go to super bantamweight. Like it's just a mad sport. You know what I mean? You can never promise anything because things always change. So, you might have had to do that. You might have had to go up.
And when you look around at that lightweight division, what names take your fancy right now, whether domestically or on the global stage? Which ones are you really intrigued by?
I'll be real honest with you. At this moment in time, I'm just focusing on me. So this is my new weight. I had one fight Saturday. I'm just trying to just get momentum. Then we'll start eyeing up certain competition or whatever. You know what I mean? But at this moment in time, I'm just focusing on being the best version of me, the best lightweight I can be, and then the names will come. Then Joe will say, right, we want this fighter or we want that fighter. I'm just working I'm like a new kid at school in it. So I'm just trying to, get a little detention here and there, and then boom, I'd be the bad kid. But yeah, I'm just trying to just make my little way through first, and then it won't take long. One more fight or two, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, Zelfa. I really appreciate letting me ask some questions. Eamon, I'm going to bring you back in here. Have you got any questions for Zelfa?
Yeah, we got a question coming in from the chat from Thunder Road, and he says, "Why is Zelfa being so inactive? Is it boxing, politics, anything he can share?"
Well, I could just say it was no fault. It's no fault of mine. Like I beat Jordan Gill, and then I didn't fight for 10 months after. I wasn't injured. I wasn't. There was no fault. I was in the gym every day still. So I don't know. You know, this is where it's changing. I box February. I just box now in June. Hopefully, I'm out on the matching show on July 5th. Hopefully, waiting to find out. So you know, we'll try to be as active as we can.
Jack Dutton says, "What do you think about Loma announcing his retirement, Zelfa?"
You know what? He's an asset to the sport, Loma. He's completed it. You know, he's done 2-time gold medalist, Olympian, been unified world champion, feather, super feather, and lightweight. So, you know, he's accomplished everything. So you know, he can be like some ambassador now for the sport because he was one of the best ever to do it. So, you know, credit to him, man. He's had a long journey, and it's good for him to must have got the gloves, man. He's achieved what some people will never achieve.
A question coming in from Eddie Hills. I don't know who that's in reference to, but lightweight is stacked. Is Zelfa ready to climb the ranks and the time that will take?
Well, it won't take long, man. You know, I'm already a household name. I'm a good fighter. You know, whoever they put in front of me, I'll beat. But it's just at this moment in time, I'm just finding my shoe there. You know, I'm just fitting in at enough moment in time. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how stacked it is. I'll be in that stack. I was already in the super featherweight stack. All you have to do is pull me out that stack. Pull it up. That's all. And
Certainly got the lines for it. Just going into the weekend, and look, when it comes to changing trainers, and you'll do all the training behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis, but never truly prepares you for obviously being in the ring and being in those moments and seeing if it gels when you're actually in the fight circumstance. How did it feel being in the corner, getting the instructions from Joe, and that process of taking those instructions and affecting them?
you know what? Joe just keeps it basically the same as sparring. We do the same warm up, same pads, and it's just like it's like a professional spar. Like him speaking to me, you know what I mean? That's all it is. There's no change. Cool, calm, very clear. Can hear him from the ring, like I can hear him from the ring in sparring. Like so, you know, there's no like really change. Plus, I've had like 35 fights. I'm an experienced professional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know my way around the ring. Well, I should do anyway. So yeah, it's like it's just gelled.
Was it weird not having Pat there?
No, because I've been sparring without him being there. You know what I mean? So I was just used to it, and obviously this is the chain that I've chosen and done. So mentally, I was used to it too.
Hulusu Ozdemir says, Zelfa, what world champion would you give yourself a high chance of beating? Wants to put you on the spot here. Which one would you have the most confidence in beating?
The WBO world title, so I'll be going for that one.
going for the WBO.
The vacant one. Whoever wants it, they can get it, man.
Abdullah Mason fought this weekend. Did you watch him?
He's a bad boy. Yeah, he's good. He's good. He's good. You know, I watched the fight. He's got a good jab. You know, he looks tricky, man. He's a good fighter.
And we've got here is Zelfa a Man U supporter like Josh Hart? Josh Hart being a fake Man U supporter. Is that right? You are,
of course, man.
You are a proper Man United.
I'm from the proper side of Manchester, the red side. So yeah, of course I am.
Don't know why they're giving Josh some stick here. But Zelfa, look, I'll leave the final word with you. You said you're going to be out very soon. What sort of level do you want to be in at? Where do you want to be before the close of the year?
There's any level. I'm a world level fighter, so it doesn't really matter what level it's about, what Joe wants. But you know, I'm a fighter in it, so I'll fight anyone and wherever. I'd like to be back on the world level where I was. So, you know, yeah, like I said, I'm just new to this. I'm new to this weight. I need to win certain belts, maybe the intercontinentals or the whatever to get into them ratings. I can't just go, all right, I've gone up now. I'm going to go fight for this. It doesn't work like that. So that's why I was talking about having to take the right steps and having to take the right fights to get to them, to get to the world title stage. So, any level, hopefully, God willing, that end of the year could be a world title fight. I don't know. We'll just see what comes up. There might be a international fight or whatever, and then boxing's funny, so can only wait and see.
Well, Zelfa, congratulations on the lightweight debut win, and looking forward to that next fight that's coming very soon. Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you, man. Nice one, boys. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Is that fun?
That was Zelfa Barrett, who's now moved to Joe Gallagher, training still in Manchester, but with the first fight out off of the back of leaving Uncle Pat Barrett as a trainer, but not, and of course, a family capacity, still close ties, of course, with the family and Pat, but moving to Joe Gallagher and racking up his first win at lightweight. Back to Josh Hart, who was getting some stick there from the Thunder Road. Fake United supporter, you're Nottingham, right?
Yes, I'm sure we've been over this before on the live, Eamon. I come here to talk about boxing, not to get slandered week in, week out. Yes, I'm a Man U supporter. No, it's not fun being a Man U supporter. And I think we can leave it there. We've seen the season we've just had. It's not been great.
Eddie says here, hopefully against a world level lightweight to prove at new weight soon. Talented fighter, Zelfa Barrett certainly is. Just needs that extra gear to get out of him, and he can capture a world title for sure. He's got that potential in him. We will move on to our next topic, and that is the last one. That is Lomachenko, who has now announced his retirement. It's a bit up in the air with Lomachenko, and he's taken a long time since his last outing to decide whether to hang up the gloves, but he has now made that decision that boxing is no longer for him, and he takes with him a glittering career, a brilliant one, which saw a innovative style, innovative way of fighting, a bit of cockiness, a bit of arrogance about it, but that was very much backed up by the way he fought. A number of brilliant fights, close fights towards the end of his career as well, where you might have thought that another night, another set of judges, he would have got the wins on his ledger as opposed to the likes of Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney, but they got the nod on the nights. But Lomachenko leaves behind a brilliant legacy. What will you remember of Lomachenko, Josh?
I think you'll just remember everything about him and the unique style, just everything. One of the most precise punches that we've seen in a long time. I still feel that night against Devin Haney was the night his hand should have been raised. I know there's a lot of split opinion on that one, but I do believe he won that fight. Obviously, some people were lucky enough to be able to watch him in the flesh at the O2 when he fought Luke Campbell. Loma's just done a lot, man, and especially while his pro record might not get that recognition it deserves, when you go look at that amateur history record of 396 wins and 1 loss, and he avenged that 1 loss in the amateurs. It's things you'll never see. I think I saw Ade Oladipo tweet it saying records are meant to be broken, but a record like that will never be beaten. And I can only agree with him when he tweets things and says things like that. Loma is truly one of a kind, and if that is it for him now and he is retiring, then, well, not if he is retiring, he now has retired. We can only wish him well in whatever he goes on to do next and thank him for all the great memories that he's given us as boxing fans.
He's given us some great memories, but he's given us one terrible cliche that was born out of his brilliance, and that was downloading the data. I couldn't stand downloading the data and still can't, and that still gets used now. Terence Crawford has adopted that one for the back of his feats in the sport, but Lomachenko, I think, was the first instance of downloading the data after being called the Matrix, but signs off with a win. Should have been undisputed champion, I feel. Lomachenko should have, but had brilliant names on his ledger: Nicholas Walters, Roman Martinez, Linares, Teofimo Lopez on a losing effort on the night, as was Devin Haney. I thought that Tia fight was a draw, to be honest with you. But Luke Campbell was a real good win. Pedraza, Rigondeaux, just a number of brilliant fighters on his ledger, and you would have felt that he could have probably continued. But he might have thought that if he wasn't going to get the nods on those big nights, then it's not for him anymore, and he can certainly enjoy his time out of retirement. But that's about it for this episode of Seconds Out Live. We had Thomas Hauser on the chat, esteemed boxing journalist and Hall of Fame writer. Then we had Josh Hart, who's none of the above, but still just a little bit of a joke, Josh. I wonder what you guys thought in the chat. Let me know if you're still sticking around before we close out, what you thought of the idea of bringing in more guests on. If you enjoyed Thomas and the Q&A portion as well, having Zelfa, that's something that we might look to do a lot more alongside, of course, digesting the weekend's boxing action. It does mean that we have to, I guess, slice some of the takes from the boxing topics in as well and mix them up with the Q&A portion, which isn't a bad thing. It's just the way we'd have to operate it. But if you enjoyed that, then that's something we can look at more and bringing on other people in to spice up the show for sure, and not just have me joining on at you, even though some of you seem to enjoy that in some capacity. But yeah, please do let us know either in the chat right now or after the fact in the comments, and we'll get back to them. But usually, in fact, I'll dip in one last time before we go to the end of the show, and I'll leave Josh the opportunity to think of the last word that he wants to leave with. It is what it is. Hardnut TV says Dillian should not fight this kid. This kid is going to hurt him bad. I think that's in reference to, excuse me, Moses Itauma and Dillian Whyte. Hulusu Ozdemir says, thank you for a great show, gentlemen. You're welcome. Jack Dutton says, Loma looked very good against Kambosos. I thought so. I'm not sure why he retired. Eddie Hill says, crazy how most saw Loma as a better fighter when him and Usyk burst on the scene. I think pound for pound, Loma probably is the better fighter, the more talented fighter of the two. It's just that Usyk and Loma are about as close as to a 1-for-1 translation to what Loma does into another fighter in the ring. So Usyk has adopted as much as he can, and of course that happened, and those teachings came from when Usyk left James Ali Bashir and then took on Anatoly Lomachenko. I believe that's his dad's name, but at least Papachenko, as he's affectionately called. Thunder Road says, Josh is esteemed. Yes to more boxing guests, journalists, and boxers, says Thunder Road. Good. There's one vote in that column. I'll just see if I've missed anything at all either. I don't think I have. MB Boxer very poor, failed to capitalize on Frank Eddy neglect of UK scene. Yeah, I think one of the things that Boxer failed to capitalize upon is, and Eddie admits that, and whilst Eddie will blow his own trumpet and say that he's the best promoter, this, that, and the other, and is whatever, but has also admitted there is an element of luck. I think what Eddie did brilliant was when he saw something that was hot, he hammered it and went with it. And you have to have a little bit of luck. And Froch versus Groves was that little bit of luck. The controversy resonated, and he hammered it, and got that rematch to happen. And that rematch helped, I think, alongside the first fight, helped birth a number of a new generation of boxing fans. And then he put that momentum into that and Anthony Joshua. And then that helped because Joshua, of course, coming off his Olympic success, he's a good-looking heavyweight fighter who resonates with not only London, but the wider appeal of the UK, and was able to build off the success of Anthony Joshua and then launch that into the rest of his promotion. So sometimes you need that little bit of luck, and I feel like Boxer didn't capitalize upon. Sure, it's not a 1-for-1, but they had a moment with Taylor versus Cattrall on that controversy, and that controversy was getting quite a lot of beat, but it took ages for that rematch to happen. It was 2 years down the line, and then the rematch happened on DAZN. And you would have thought that instead of maybe was making some signings that cost him millions, as was reported, then you might have made the decision in hindsight to try and push over some other fights instead of those signings. And that will be something that he'll look back on maybe as a mistake. Get Prince Patel on. I'm not adverse to getting any boxer on at any stage of their career. Prince Patel is very much welcome, I believe, to come on to Seconds Out. So if he's interested, by all means, we'll see how fruitful that conversation will be. Maybe Josh can reach out to Prince Patel. There's a meeting of the minds for you, Josh and Prince Patel. But Josh, yeah, as is customary, it's a quiet period as we're waiting for the big fights to ramp up, but we'll be busying and being as busy as we can be as much as possible. But what would you like to leave the Seconds Out listeners with for this week?
Just the usual. Thank you all for watching. It's always good to be on. Well, not as much of me seen today. I think I've got to give a big shout out to Eamon for bringing on the guests and putting it all together. I think on weeks like this, that format works perfectly, and I hope we can continue to do that moving forward. And yeah, hope you've all enjoyed. Hope you've all enjoyed as much as I have. And we're back again this time next week to dive into all the action of what's coming up. Thank you.